From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and here's what's ahead. K-State's Jeff Whitworth on insect control decisions for grain sorghum. He's receiving questions from growers about corn leaf aphids and the potential for the return of sugarcane aphids. Jeff says that the presence of sorghum headworms could further complicate a grower's plan of action here. Then the latest edition of FSA Coffee Talk from the Farm Service Agency. Dara Conley will cover a number of current USDA farm program items of interest. Among them, potential additions to coronavirus aid program eligibility. Later on, K-State's Charlie Lee then telling of a new study on deer fawn losses that rendered unexpected results. All that here on Agriculture Today.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others, and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Thanks for listening in. This is Agriculture Today. Well, here we are in the middle part of August now, and we've several insect pests of concern yet in our row crops around Kansas, and we'll concentrate largely on grain sorghum here, as along with us once more is crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth of K-State Research and Extension. Well, let's take up a pair of aphid considerations here, Jeff, the corn leaf aphid being among them, and you say that you are hearing from producers about that pest.
Good morning. Yes, this is Kansas, and we've had aphids in sorghum since we've had sorghum.
The dawn of time.
In Kansas. There's generally 4 species of aphids. One of the ones that we always have commonly throughout the state is the cornleaf aphid. And it's named cornleaf aphid primarily because it gets in corn early on, because we generally plant corn before we plant sorghum. This year, I've probably gotten more calls about cornleaf aphids than I have total in the last 20 years, and it's all on sorghum. And as you know, the sorghum's looking pretty good around the state. We've gotten timely moisture and adequate moisture, and so everybody's pretty concerned about any pests that we have out there, trying to reduce some of the yield potential. And I understand that. So they're out looking, which is good, and they're noticing cornleaf aphids. Cornleaf aphids are a greenish aphid. They're greenish-gray. They're a little larger than a green bug. They're quite a bit larger than a sugarcane aphid. But they're the ones generally that you find early on in the whorl stage. That's when people start noticing, because they build up into pretty sizable, they can build up into pretty sizable populations as the sorghum or the corn is in the whorl stage. The problem with that is they produce a lot of honeydew. So sometimes if the populations build up enough just at the right time, as the sorghum tries to extend the head out of into the boot stage, there can be enough honeydew and it's sticky enough that it really retards the ability of the plant to get that head out in a timely fashion. Now, one of the pluses with the production of honeydew is there are a lot of beneficials. So one of the easiest ways to find cornleaf aphid populations, just look for beneficials flying around, the syrphid flies or the green lacewings or lady beetles. And if you look around, then you'll start seeing the shininess on the leaves. And you look in the whorl, and a lot of times there'll be cornleaf aphids.
Well, the beneficials take care of this aphid, though?
Usually, in years past, they've always taken care of the cornleaf aphid. And as a matter of fact, we always recommend not treating for cornleaf aphids because they're providing that springboard host for the beneficials in case we have aphids like the soybean aphid or sugarcane aphid or any other aphid outbreaks later on in the year. So cornleaf aphids are always there. I've never seen them cause a problem or cause enough to consider to make a treatable recommendation. And I'm not sure there is a economic injury level or a treatment threshold, just because there's always a few around, but it's just a plant per plant basis or a area here. It's not a field-wide problem. And as those heads come out of the whirl, now again, they're producing a lot of honeydew, and I've seen them come out, and those heads come up just as they come up out of the whirl. It looks like somebody poured waffle syrup on them because of the honeydew. But as soon as those aphids die, that honeydew becomes dry, and it doesn't interfere with pollination. Nothing that I have ever recommended to treat before. But this year in 2020, like I said, I've gotten calls already from the northwestern part of the state, north central part of the state, Texas, Oklahoma Panhandle, and southwest Kansas relative to cornleaf aphids. I'm just hoping that we have some cornleaf aphids and they're allowing the beneficials to build up just in case we have another more problematic aphid later on. And one of the things I always ask the callers, are there a lot of beneficials? And all the callers I've had so far are, proud to say, yeah, there's lots of beneficials, and we don't want to kill those. And so the recommendation is, if you have a few cornleaf aphids, if you have a few plants that are really sticky and they're just in the boot stage or in the whorl stage, I think the beneficials will probably overcome, and eventually you won't have a problem with the sorghum relative to the cornleaf aphids.
Now, that other problematic aphid that you allude to, would that be the sugarcane aphid?
Yes, and that brings up the point of the sugarcane aphid. The problem we've had since 2014, when they first were detected in the state. Once again, if you have a few cornleaf aphids, that's allowing the beneficials to build up, the little parasitic wasps, the green lacewings or other lacewings, the lady beetles, and some of the syrphid flies. That allows those beneficials to build up in populations just in case we get sugarcane aphids. The last 3 years, 2019, 18, and 17, we had sugarcane aphids every year, but they weren't like they were in 2015 and 2016. I mean, those sugarcane aphid populations were amazing, from south central Kansas all the way to almost the Nebraska border. And in 2017, 18, and 19, we've had them. We're always on the lookout for them, but they hadn't built up into the sizable populations to cause the problems that they did in 2015 and 16. Why that is? Well, I'm not exactly sure. It could be related to planting time. If you plant early or plant late, that can help. And it's also related to the numbers of beneficials, I think, that we have, because beneficials really help hold these populations down early on. But I've talked to some of the entomologists at Texas A&M in Texas, in the southern part, and out in the Panhandle, up around Lubbock and Amarillo, and they're not seeing populations of sugarcane aphids yet that they're worried about. So realize these aphids come in from the south every year, and we don't know if they overwinter or not. It doesn't matter whether they do. If they come up here in populations like we saw in 2015-16, it doesn't matter whether they overwinter or not. They get here in massive numbers, and then they're able to reproduce quite quickly. If that happens, we may have to consider treating for sugarcane aphids, especially if we have sorghum headworms. They can get into the head of sorghum. Basically, the sorghum is vulnerable between flowering and soft dough. So you don't want to get out and look too early, and you don't want to get out and look too late. But between flowering and soft dough is when you need to get out and check heads for worms. For those species that get in the head and feed on those berries or those kernels, they're going to cause a 5% loss per worm per head. So it's a little different kind of a treatment threshold than when we say, yeah, you got one worm per row foot or something like that. It's one worm causes 5% loss per head. So you can figure out if you got, two worms, 100% of the heads, you're going to lose 10%. So that makes it a little bit easier, in my opinion, to determine whether you need to treat. Now, again, remember, just from flowering to soft dough, we had a graduate student that did considerable research on that. Once it gets to the soft dough stage, If there are large worms out there, they can still feed, but they're not going to do much damage. And there's not going to be any more small ones because they can't, the berries are they're not providing any nutrition for them. So between flowering and soft dough. Now, once you decide to treat, if you use a conventional insecticide, you're going to kill the beneficials that are out there. You're going to kill the aphids that are out there, but you're going to kill the beneficials also. So the insecticide's going to last 10 to 14 days. It's going to get you through the period of time when the sorghum head is vulnerable to the headworms, okay? 10 to 14 days. But then if we get sugarcane aphids in the next 2 weeks, 10 days or 14 days after you've treated, there's not going to be any insecticide there to help control those aphids. Those aphid populations are going to explode. At least we've seen them do that in the past because you've killed all the beneficials, all the natural controls that are out there. Mm-hmm. So that's always a consideration. Do I treat for the head worm or do I not in case we get sugarcane aphids? And that, to me, is a dilemma. But to me, you have to protect your crop. You know you have a certain percent of your yield potentially lost due to headworms. You can sit right there and count the number of worms, figure it out, 5% per worm per head, versus whether we're going to have sugarcane aphids at treatable levels or not, or if they're going to be here in time that you need to treat them. So, my recommendation is a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. If you have good yield potential and you have a pretty good infestation of headworms, in my opinion, you have to protect that yield and hope the aphids don't show up in treatable numbers. But if they do, you can worry about it at that time.
Very well. Jeff, thanks for passing all of that along to our sorghum growers. We'll have you back soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Eric.
Crop entomologist, K-State Research and Extension, Jeff Whitworth. And once more, if you have questions about insect issues in any of your row crop stands out there, you can contact Jeff directly or through your local Extension agricultural agent. They can help you likewise. We'll be back with more on this Agriculture Today.
When you are in need of timely, reliable, and trusted information, K-State Research and Extension is here. Whether it's organizing people, information, or resources, they have the necessary tools. Community comes first for K-State Research and Extension. For more information and to connect with your county's extension agents, visit www.ksre.k-state.edu.
Coming your way next on Agriculture Today, our regular feature from the Farm Service Agency state headquarters here in Kansas, the FSA Coffee Talk, every other Tuesday right here. This time around, we're visiting with a program specialist out of the Kansas FSA Farm Programs Division, Dara Conley, on an array of timely program details that you producers should know about. Dara, thanks for being along with us, and there is a great deal going on within the auspices of your division right now, you say.
Yeah, thanks for having me today, Eric. It is a busy time with FSA, as you said. Many programs are going on simultaneously right now, and our county offices are doing a phenomenal job of pushing out these all-important benefits out into the heartland of rural America. As summer is progressing along, so are our programs. Mm-hmm. We are beginning to take steps on closing out our 2020 program year here at the end of September. But at the same time, we're going to start that new year off on October 1st. We also want to take a quick peek into the beginning of the year as well, Eric.
Let's do just that and start with an update on the aid program for producers, which was triggered by the pandemic, the CFAP program. What's the latest there, if you would?
Yes. So CFAP, it stands for Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. This has been widely popular across the state and the nation. Many producers have already taken advantage of this assistance under the program, but some producers haven't. And so what they need to know right now is the deadline to apply is August 28th. So that, is just 3 more weeks that'll be open and available for the CFAP program. Another thing to keep in mind is that even if you have applied producers are going to want to stay tuned because within the next week, we're expecting the possibility of additional crops that may become eligible. This could be both under the specialty crop provisions, which would be like your fruit and vegetable crops, but also there's a consideration of potential additional livestock that may be eligible for this program. We're still waiting on the official word for the eligibility of those areas, but, of course, there will be numerous press releases when those announcements are made, and producers should watch out for more information to come in their Gov Delivery newsletters from their local county offices, as well as the national media outlets.
And important to stay alert here because that deadline will remain August the 28th. So if there are additional opportunities under CFAP, producers will have to act rather swiftly.
That's right. Yeah. Yep, that's right.
Something else you wanted to spend a few moments with us with an update on the Noninsured Assistance Program, or NAP, with another key date here. What's happening with that program?
Eric, under the NAP, or like you said, the Non-Insured Assistance Program, September 1st is an important date to keep in mind because it marks the first of the 4 application closing dates for coverage or crop protection. FSA's NAP program covers those crops that are not traditionally covered by multi-peril crop insurance. So this September 1st date is mainly applicable to your small grain grazing and or small grain forage producers. When we think about small grains, what comes to mind mostly is wheat and triticale grazing. However, keep in mind some small grains for grain production could also be eligible, such as triticale and oats in some areas.
So it's an opportunity producers don't want to overlook. Briefly, here are some of the mechanics of the NAP program that producers should know about. You might share those, Dara.
Sure. For NAP, a service fee is required to be paid in order for the application for coverage to be considered filed. So the service fee is $325 per crop per administrative county, up to $825 per producer per administrative county. And then there's a cap for all their counties. It won't exceed $1,950 per producer. So that would be the very top dollar mark that producers would have to pay to participate with NAP. Another thing to keep in mind with NAP would be beginning farmers and ranchers, limited resource farmers and ranchers, socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, as well as veteran farmers and ranchers will receive, upon certification, a waiver of the service fee and a 50% premium reduction. And one final thing to share with you then is buy-up coverage is offered for eligible crops with an intended use other than grazing. And, also producers, if they want to know more information about their specific crop that they're interested in participating in the NAP program on, producers are going to want to visit fsa.usda.gov/NAP. Or, the best thing is just to contact their local FSA office.
Very good. Keeping in mind that deadline of September the 1st, the application closing date. Other dates to be aware of, there's one regarding the ARC PLC program that will be coming up relatively soon, Dara.
Yes. So I want to mention for ARC PLC, we have a September 30th deadline for producers who are wishing to update their price loss coverage yields under the ARC PLC program. So updating the yields was part of the 2018 Farm Bill provisions, which allowed producers a one-time option here in 2020 to update their PLC yields for their farm records on covered commodities used for farm payment calculations. The reporting period and consideration for producers that want to come in and do this action and update the yields on their farm records, they're considering years 2013 through 2017 crop year production. So this is a simple average of the 5 years production times a 90% factor. So producers want to keep in mind, even though they may not be enrolled in the PLC program, they may want to take advantage of this one-time opportunity to update their yields and potentially even increase their yields in case maybe they want to switch later to PLC during, our 5-year cycle. So with this Farm Bill, producers have that option to switch programs from year to year, beginning with 2021. So producers are encouraged to use their RMA crop insurance, actual production, or their APH records, to help out with this update on their farm records.
And as a footnote to this, you wanted to steer producers in the direction of information on the payment projections under ARC PLC, and that would be something they'd want to probably look up pretty soon now.
That's right. So ARC PLC payments are generated typically in the month of October every year. As we wrap up our 2020 fiscal year and begin that next fiscal year, typically October is kind of what we set aside as payment month. And right now, everybody's anxious to know, what those 19 payments are going to trigger and how much. The producers are going to have a great resource out there with our sister agency, Kansas Extension, that will help guide them to know what kind of rates their county ARC PLC payments are set to pay out this fall. So they have a map of the state of Kansas and the different payment rates by commodities broke down by county. And this can be found on their Ag Manager website, and that website is www.agmanager.info.
And by all means, producers take full advantage of that tool that the agricultural economists here at K-State have put together for your use on that, agmanager.info. One final program to touch upon here, and that is the WHIP Plus program, how enrollment might be going with that. That's another form of relief for producers. Dara.
Yes. So there is no established deadline yet for filing under the WHIP Plus program. But it's important that producers with crop losses due to drought, excessive moisture, flood, tornado, or wildfire, and it's regarding the years of 2018 and 2019 that producers would have been affected by those disasters, that they want to contact their administrative county FSA offices to discuss the possibility of their eligibility. In many cases, FSA is able to gather that data needed electronically through RMA, once those producers inquire about the program.
All right. Well, we've clicked through quite a few program particulars here, but as we finish up here, you want to remind producers to have a dialogue with their local FSA personnel on any or all of these matters.
That's right, Eric. Producers can always reach out through phone or email, with their local FSA offices right now if they have additional or specific questions regarding their farms. A couple of other sources of information that may be resourceful for producers to check out is going to be our farmers.gov webpage. This webpage contains important information about programs, deadlines, and how to apply for benefits. It also contains blogs where farmers share their own experiences, and it's just farmers and ranchers helping each other out. So it's a great resource and website for producers to check out as well. This website is, not only for our row crop guys, but for our livestock producers as well.
Dara, we appreciate the overview of all of these important USDA program details as they are to the moment, and we will talk again soon. Many thanks to you.
Thanks for having me, Eric. We appreciate it.
And she's out of the Farm Programs Division of the Farm Service Agency State Office for Kansas, a program specialist there. Dara Conley. And once more, any questions that you have about any of this, bring it to the attention of your local FSA folk. And that's the latest FSA Coffee Talk here on Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome back to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Well, a ways to go yet, but if the latest crop progress and condition numbers for Kansas from the USDA hold, we're looking at bumper sorghum and soybean crops in the state this year. For the week ending this past Sunday, Topsoil moisture supply is 68% adequate, 8% surplus, only 24% short to very short. Subsoil, 7% surplus, 69% adequate, 24% short to very short. Kansas corn condition rated at 62% good to excellent, 27% fair, 11% poor to very poor. Corn silking at 95%, in the dough stage 67%, and corn dented at 26%. Kansas soybean crop condition, 70% good to excellent, 25% fair, 5% poor to very poor. Soybeans blooming at 85% and setting pods now at 64%. And grain sorghum in the state, 72% good to excellent, 23% fair, 5% poor to very poor. Sorghum headed 63% and sorghum turning color at 9% as of this past weekend. Range and pasture conditions rated at 54% good to excellent this week, 31% fair, and 15% poor to very poor. For the look on crop conditions nationally for corn and soybeans, we turn now to the USDA's Rod Bain.
Corn silking is almost done with the nation's corn crop. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says corn in the doughing stage increased significantly from the previous week,
passing the halfway mark to reach 59% by August 9th, ahead of the 5-year average of 52% and last year's very sluggish pace, 34%.
In terms of total condition for this year's crop so far,
we did see a 1 percentage point decline in the good to excellent rating. We also saw a 1 percentage point increase in the very poor to poor rating.
Almost all the nation's soybeans have reached the bloom stage. Rippey says bean pod setting is also making progress.
All 18 major production states have passed the halfway mark on soybean setting pods. That pushes the national number by August 9th to 75% setting pods, ahead of the 5-year average of 68% and well ahead of last year's 49%.
Looking at crop condition for the week ending August 9th.
Improving further, now 74% good to excellent, up a point from last week. Just 5% of the crop rated very poor to poor. That is down a point from last week. Far better than what we saw this time a year ago when soybeans were rated 54% good to excellent and 13% very poor to poor.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Those are the latest numbers on crop conditions in Kansas and the nation from the USDA. Now it's on to the weekly feature for you dairy producers, Milk Lines, with K-State dairy specialist Mike Brook. Mike?
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers concerning, something that you probably noticed in your milk check when you opened it up a week or so ago, and that was the negative PPD, or the negative producer price differential. I know negative numbers when it comes to PPDs are not unusual. Since the new milk marketing orders were enacted in January of 2000, there's been about 26 months during that time, or about 26% of the time, when PPD was negative, and the average negativity of that was about 70 cents a hundredweight during those times. However, when you open your check up here in the central order in Kansas, you probably were shocked to see that the PPD was a negative $7.51 per hundredweight for the month of June, which is a record high. The next closest value of that high would have been a negative $4.02, but that was in April of 2004. So the magnitude of that number and its impact on your eventual milk check probably caught you by surprise. So why did this happen? We get a lot of questions about that, and it really happened because cheese price advanced a lot during the month of June. You see, when we set up the milk marketing orders, one of the things that the milk marketing order does is it provides a level price for fluid milk during the month of June. That's based on, in this case, the first 2 weeks of prices paid for commodities in May. So those values that we use for things like butter and cheese the first 2 weeks in May, actual prices on the wholesale market that were reported were used to determine what we would pay for components in the month of June. Well, the situation we had is during the month of June we saw a record increase in the price of cheese for a short period of time. The average price of cheese during those 2 weeks in May was only $1.18. However, for the month of June, the price for cheese averaged $2.21. this is a huge, huge increase in the price of cheese. As a result of that, we had rapidly advancing Class 3 milk prices during the month of June, and that resulted in a situation where the value of those components produced in June were worth much more than their value assigned during the first 2 weeks in May, in which the collection was based on. So this results in a negative PPD. That's the main reason why that PPD was so negative in the month of June. There are some other things that affect that, such as the amount of milk pooled on the order and those sorts of things. But here's a real question for you. I know the negative number caught you by surprise, but that also meant that milk was worth more. Do you actually get more in a month where you have a greater negative PPD? So does the negative PPD really hurt the price that you actually receive for your milk? Well, that's kind of an interesting thought to think about. So in those months where PPD have been negative in the past 20 years, milk has averaged $17.12 a hundredweight. In the months where it's been positive, milk has only averaged $15.81. So let's take it a little bit further and let's look at just recent history. In May, the statistical uniform price here in the central order was $12.24. In June, it was $13.53. The blend price, if you'd rather look at it that way, for May was $12.72, while for June it was $14.36, an increase of $1.64 a hundredweight over the price you received for blend milk in May. So, did the negative PPD hurt your milk check? Well, when you actually look at milk revenue, your milk check actually grew because of a higher value in milk. Did you lose $7.51 due to the negative PPD? Well, yes, I guess in a way that is true. However, keep in mind that your overall milk check still increased. So it was a positive thing, even though that negative number looked pretty large when you opened the check. This is Mike Brook with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to take a look at how PPD is affecting their bottom line, but keep in mind that it's important to look at the final pay price.
Thanks, Mike. And this is Agriculture Today.
Social distancing slows the spread of coronavirus, so stay a minimum of 6 feet away from others and stay home if you can. More info at coronavirus.gov. Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Up for you now on Agriculture Today, our weekly segment on wildlife management featuring Charlie Lee, wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension. Charlie, you've new research information to share with us today on deer fawn survival and the role of predators in that survival. Before we talk of the study itself, what's been the contemporary thinking on that in wildlife management circles?
Well, we know that the population dynamics of large herbivores are primarily driven by rates of the adult female survival and juvenile recruitment, meaning fawn survival and those young fawns then being able to grow within the population until they're at breeding age. Because adult female survival is usually high and it's constant compared to juvenile recruitment, we often attempt to increase population growth and focus management efforts on trying to increase that neonate and early fawn survival. In white-tailed deer populations, the estimates of that neonate survival and cause-specific mortality events vary depending upon what region of the United States that you're in. But recent studies across North America have documented that juvenile survival estimates for deer range from about 14% in North Carolina to 87% in Minnesota, with many studies listing predation as the leading cause of mortality. And coyotes are typically the predominant predator of deer. Bobcat and black bear are also common predators.
Therefore, there's been a great deal invested over the years in attempting to control predators for the benefit of deer, right?
Particularly in the southeast part of the United States, as coyotes have recently immigrated into that region, there's been a lot of work done on trying to reduce those juvenile losses by trapping or eliminating coyotes as a predator for white-tailed deer fawns. This particular study was done in Delaware in an area that had what they determined was few to no large predators. Deer density was fairly high, with one deer per about 12 to 13 acres, and the only known deer predator would be humans. So the area did have a hunting and trapping season since 2014, and during that time of reporting data, there were no coyotes that were harvested in that particular location in 2016 or 2017. There were no confirmed black bear or bobcat sightings for more than 100 years in that location. So they decided to also employ motion cameras, trail sensing motion cameras, to determine predator occupation. So they set out trail cams, tried to monitor the number of predators, and basically said not any predators in this area that are going to be significantly taking deer. There were some red fox, but no coyotes, bobcats, or black bears. Then they captured deer from 2015 through 2017 using rocket nets and drop nets and clover traps, fitted those deer with transmitters where they knew where the female deer was, and vaginally implanted transmitters to know when the birth occurred, and then immediately searched, or within the hour, searched for those young fawns and followed them at various time intervals throughout early stages of those deer fawns' lives.
And we're trying to track their survivability and if they, in fact, succumbed to what. And the findings here were rather unexpected, you say.
Well, contrary to their hypothesis, the absence of predation mortality in their study did not appear to result in an increase in neonate survival rates relative to the regions where there was high rates of predation in other locations. That was pretty surprising. They had greater than 90-day survival rates in the areas where they opportunistically captured juvenile fawns, because they also found fawns through these search patterns that had not been included with transmitters. They found that the natural causes, excluding predation, what were disease, emaciation, and birth defects, they all accounted for all forms of mortality, which was 42 instances of neonate mortality in that particular study. The birth mass weight, the age of the dam, and the precipitation all influenced that mortality risk within the first 7 days of life, but no variables were associated with survival from day 8 to day 28. So the non-predation-related mortality causes resulted in survival rates that were very similar to other regions with established predator communities. Their conclusion was that non-predation-related mortality is the ultimate driving factor controlling neonate survival in other regions, but it can be confused with proximal mortality factors such as predation.
So what does this say then about attempts to promote deer numbers by predation control? It would seem that efforts could be vested elsewhere. What?
Yeah, I think you need to, if you're going to try to increase fawn survival by limiting mortality, you need to focus on the cause. And natural mortality, not related to predation, may be the ultimate cause rather than the proximate cause. And I think as it shows, the relationship between the age of the female and fawn survival shows that those females that have a little more age are probably fawning or bedding in areas that have higher quality habitat. And as we've talked many times, I think habitat management is probably the key. So perhaps in those locations where they suspect lower survival than what is needed, focus on habitat management during that fawning time.
Well, these were, again, unanticipated results of a study out of the state of Delaware, and it got a gauge on how predation fits into deer fawn survival and the actual contribution of predation to fawn losses. And Charlie, we appreciate you reviewing this with us today. He's a wildlife specialist with K-State Research and Extension, Charlie Lee. Our time's away for today's edition. As always, thanks for listening in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.